Right, so I'm going to talk to you about Bridgetown today, but before we get into that, I want to zoom like all the way out and just talk about web applications in general, because like this is what like traditional server-side server rendered web apps kind of look like. Your web browser makes an HTTP request to a server. Server has some software on it that knows how to interpret that request. To fulfill it, it loads some data from a database. It renders an HTML page, which it sends back to the browser, and the browser renders it for the user to see. This has been around probably since mid to late 90s. In 2024, I still think it's probably the best way to build web applications. Stuff like Rails, Laravel, and stuff shines at stuff like this. But what if like what you're building is less of a web application, but more of like a website where all the content's pretty static. All the users who come to see the website see the exact same thing. Then like dynamically generating the page on every request, it becomes a bit of an overkill in my opinion. So in the last decade or so, we've seen a new approach kind of gain a lot of popularity, and that is using a static site generator. So in this approach, what you have is you have your data in like YAML or JSON files, like just in static files. You have your HTML templates, which you can write using, I don't know, like whatever ERB or Mustache or Nunjucks or whatever templating language is on offer in the tool you're using. And of course, you have your assets and stuff like that. And you put all of these things into a static site generator. And what you get out of the other end is a fully built HTML structure, which you can then just put on a CDN or a web server somewhere. And the amazing thing about this is there's really not a lot to go wrong. Like, it's just a web server returning some static HTML files. Like, you could reach the top of Hacker News, and you probably wouldn't even have to look at your monitoring because there's literally so little to go wrong. Your website's going to be fine. And also platforms like render.com and Netlify and stuff offer hosting for this kind of stuff for free. Free is always good. And you're never locked into the platform either because it's just HTML files. If they raise the prices and you take your HTML files, go elsewhere. So that's a great balance of like having free hosting but not being locked into the platform. My favorite aspect of this approach is the developer ergonomics, because you can do something really simple like create a branch, make some changes, deploy that branch to like a subdomain or something, and show that to your client or whatever. It's like, are you happy with everything? Merge that back into main and your website's updated. Yeah, that kind of workflow just becomes so easy because, again, it's hardly any moving parts to it. So yeah, it's no surprise with the way this has been gaining popularity that a plethora of static site generators have cropped up in the last decade or so in a variety of languages. So like in Go, you have Hugo. In the JavaScript world, you have 11t and Astro. Ruby, of course, you have Jekyll, which I think I would say probably kicked off this entire trend. And of course, you have Bridgetown, which I'm going to talk about today. I also want to share some static sites that are out in the wild to give you a good idea of when this is the right approach for the job. Ruby on Rails.org in the Ruby ecosystem is probably the biggest one that I could think of. That includes the Rails World website as well. That's all built on Jekyll. Firebase's blog is an Astro site. Let's Encrypt is Hugo. Of course, we run our own marketing and documentation website using our own tool, so that's fairly obvious. But this one made me really happy because this conference's website runs on Bridgetown. So when I went and viewed source, that made me very happy. It's a good choice, James. Right. So what the hell is Bridgetown? It's more than just a static site generator. We call it a progressive site generator. Just quick show of hands. How many of you here have either heard of or used Bridgetown? OK, not a lot. And how many of you have used Jekyll? OK, a lot more. So that's pretty much what I was expecting, to be honest. So Bridgetown was forked from Jekyll 4.1 in April 2020. So if you have used Jekyll and not used Bridgetown, I'd recommend checking it out because it'll look very familiar instantly. And the reason Jared kind of did that fork is that Jekyll had kind of stagnated and it wasn't really evolving with the times. All these other languages and frameworks had cropped up with new ideas, but Jekyll was kind of stuck in its ways, and Jared wanted to modernize it, so he forked it. The latest stable version is 1.3.4. We've got version 2 in beta, should be out very soon though. At the moment, we have 1.1K stars on GitHub, and we've had 73 code contributors, which is a lot higher than I thought when I looked at that yesterday. And the community is something I'm really proud of. We have a very active Discord server. If you're stuck on problems, you'll get a response there very, very quickly. Even though I've been involved with the project for a while, I get stuck very often, and it's always, I always find it just how really nice how quickly I can get support on the Discord server. So that's something I'm really proud of. Just to talk about the humans behind the repository, Jared, as I mentioned, started the project. He forked it from Jekyll. He still runs it. He doesn't like the phrase benevolent dictator for life, so I'm not going to call him that, but that's what he is. And in the core team below him, myself, my role these days is kind of like more advisory. I do tend to drop in and out of code whenever I can, but I'm a freelancer. It's hard to find time to do open source stuff, because that's time I could be billing my client for instead. So I dip in and out when I can. Adrian handles all our design and branding. Connor at this point is probably more core team emeritus, but we like him, so we've kept him on there. And he does support quite a few people in the community with questions and stuff. So yeah, we like him, so we've kept him on there. Right, that's the intro spiel out of the way. What's on the agenda for the actual part of the talk? We're going to talk about some of the modern features. So like I said, Jared forked it because he felt Jekyll was stagnating. So we've modernized it by adding a few features. We'll talk about some of those. The content rendering engine is kind of like really the heart of the product. It's what's responsible for reading content off the disk, processing it, and then rendering out the HTML site. So we've rewritten what Jekyll had. I'll talk about why. We do have a little bit of dynamic functionality. Like that's why we don't call it a static site generator. We call it a progressive site generator. So I'll talk about why that is. And finally, I'll talk about how I got involved with open source, because it's really had a massive impact on my career. And I'll talk about how I ended up getting involved and how that set me on the trajectory that I ended up going on. So sticking with me, the obligatory bit about me. That's the avatar that I use on my internet profile. I'm not quite that rock and roll in real life, but it's the internet I'm allowed to embellish. I live in London. I used to work as a mobile developer until about 2020 when I learned Ruby and Rails, and now I'm a freelancer. That's my freelance business. I'm happy to help with anything Ruby, Rails, Hotwire, web. I will be available for new work in the new year. So shameless plug, if you need help with any of that, hit me up. I've been on Bridgetown core since December 2020. I have a podcast, because who doesn't these days? Like, it's almost like obligatory to have one. Jared White and we co-host it. It's called Just a Spec. And I also run a privacy-focused mailing list app called Scattergun. And yeah, as James mentioned earlier, I've written a book. I have no vested interest at all in saying it's the most amazing book in the Rails world. Nah, I'm kidding. I do think it's rather good, to give that a look if you're interested. Right, enough of that. Let's look at the modern features. So the first thing is template engines. Jekyll has support for something called Liquid, which is a template engine created by Shopify. It's quite restrictive and fairly clunky, and I don't like it. So we have support for ERB, which I really like, because it's just Ruby within HTML. Version 2 is going to flip this on its head, so ERB will be the default, and Liquid will be an optional. And you can mix and match in the same project as well. For me personally, this is just enough reason on its own to use Bridgetown, because I really, really don't like Liquid. Yeah, it's fine for like when your users are writing templates, because you don't want them to do basically anything. But if you're writing your own templates, I don't really get the point of it. So yeah, ERB. And we also have native support for a new templating engine called Serbia. It's kind of like a mashup of ERB and Liquid. It's not really my thing, but we do have native support for it. So if this snippet of code is something that resonates with you, check that out. Front-end bundling. This is not for the faint-hearted. If you ever tried to set up Webpack or ESBuild on your own, you know what I'm talking about. It's rather painful, which is why we have ESBuild. We've standardized on that. It's fully configured with sensible defaults right out of the box. And your configuration can be easily customized. So your configuration actually lives in your project with an override point that's all really well documented. And you can do whatever fancy stuff you want with JavaScript. If you don't want to do anything fancy, you won't even know it's there. It'll be out of your way. We also have options for CSS. Post CSS is the default. It kind of lets you use next-gen CSS today, almost like a Babel equivalent for CSS. We also do support Sass, although modern CSS is so good these days that this stuff is likely to be simplified or deprecated in the future. I'm not really sure what shape it'll take, but yeah, vanilla CSS is just getting so good, like especially now with nesting support, that this stuff is likely to be on its way out. But yeah, these are the options that exist for you today. Again, fully configured out of the box. You don't really need to do anything. This is probably my favorite modern feature in Bridgetown. Like components as a way of organizing your views has been something that's been gaining a lot of traction in the last 4 or 5 years, I would say, maybe a bit more than that. React probably kicked off that trend, I would think. But in the Ruby world, we've got libraries like View Component and Flex, which let you build components using pure Ruby. And those are great. And you can pull those into Bridgetown if you want, but we thought there should be something quite lightweight that we support natively. So we have native Bridgetown Ruby components. So there is a components folder that will be created in your project. And within that, you can just create your components. So it will just be a Ruby class with an associate template that just lives side by side. And you can, if you wish, also sidecar your CSS and JavaScript files. The default ESBuild configuration will load these and look for them and load them by default, so you don't need to do anything. So if this is the kind of directory structure you like, you can have those files in there as well. The component itself, I mean, it's fairly lightweight. You just initialize it with a model, and then you can define some helper methods. In this case, I've just defined one for the src attribute. So all that noise kind of lives in a class rather than your HTML template, which means that the template can look like that and is just super clean, and you don't get cross-eyed looking at it. To render that, just create an instance of the class and pass it to the render method. It's nothing fancy. It's fairly lightweight. We wanted something simple. If you want something more complicated, you can reach for the more involved libraries, but this is what we offer natively. So just a quick recap. You can choose your own templating language between Liquid, ERB, and Serbia. We do have plugins for Haml and Slim, but we've decided as a core team we're not going to support them anymore because just got to pick our battles. If anyone in the community wants to take over ownership, we'll help you with that. But as a core team, we're not going to support those plugins anymore. We have fully configured ESBuild out of the box. For your CSS, you can use either PostCSS or Sass. And you have some lightweight Ruby components that let you keep all the clutter out of your views and nicely organized in Ruby classes. Right, this is the big one, the content rendering engine. So this is what's responsible for loading everything off disk, processing it, and then outputting the HTML structure. So basically the core functionality of Bridgetown as a tool. And obviously, we inherited this functionality from Jekyll and then decided to throw it out and rewrite it. Because that's always a good idea, right? Well, so why would we do something like that? Well, the thing is, in Jekyll, not all content is equal. It was initially developed as a blogging tool. So blog posts behave slightly differently from standalone pages like your index or your about or whatever, which behave slightly differently from your own custom collections, which is fine up to a point if you're not doing anything funky, but the moment you try to do anything a bit more advanced, it's going to be very, very fiddly. And we wanted to build something that will kind of serve Bridgetown well for the next 10, 15 years to kind of make sure it has a solid future. And we couldn't do that on the foundation we got from Jekyll. Now, that's not a knock on Jekyll. It is a product of its time, and things move on and things evolve and stuff needs to change. So I'm not knocking the framework. It's just it was a product of its time and needed to be modernized. So we decided to rewrite the content rendering engines. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what it looks like. Everything in Bridgetown goes in a collection. So in this case, I've just used pages, which is your standalone pages like index, about, contact, whatever. And the most basic unit of content in a Bridgetown site is a resource, which in this case is just an ERB file. This has a model. Model contains, as the name would describe, all the modelly bits of a resource, like front matter would be a term familiar to anyone who's used Jekyll. It's just some configuration options for that specific page. So that and the content itself, that lives in the model. Model has an origin, which in this case would just be the Git repository itself, because that's where the page lives. On the opposite end of the pipeline, you have a transformer, which is responsible for transforming the resource's source format to the destination format, in this case just ERB to HTML. And finally, you have the destination, which is literally the file path to which your resource is written. This, I think, is just really good usage of the single responsibility principle, because we've broken down every bit of the pipeline into just logical units that do one thing really well. And that also makes it very extensible, because all of these things are backed by Ruby classes. So let's say you want to do something really advanced and funky, like instead of loading stuff from just the Git repository, you want to use a headless CMS. And you want to load all your data from a headless CMS. Just write a custom origin, just subclass origin, write a custom origin, do all your advanced stuff there, and that's all you need to do. If you want to do something funky with your transformation, just write a custom transformer. You can do all your custom stuff there. So this makes it like just really extensible and really customizable if you're doing something advanced. And not doing anything advanced, you don't even need to know any of this. It's all under the hood. It's going to stay out of your way. You can ignore it completely. But it's there if you need to do something a bit interesting. So that concludes all the static parts of Bridgetown. Next is server-rendered routes. So why would we want dynamic functionality in a static site generator? Well, I come across use cases quite often where about 95 or even 99% of a website is static, and then you want tiny bit of dynamic functionality, most commonly a contact form. Like everything is static, but the client's like, oh, can we have a contact form? And you're like, oh, yeah, OK, you can. But then you got to go reaching for like a third-party tool or something that's outside the world of your project to kind of go and make that happen. And we quite like it if we had a solution within Bridgetown for that. So that's why we sprinkled on a little bit of dynamic functionality to let you do those lightweight things on top of your static stuff. So we already have Puma for our web server in development. And on top of Puma, we've layered Rhoda, which is a blazing fast, lightweight routing toolkit by Jeremy Evans. And we use Rhoda to serve your static website in development. So we thought, well, why not just extend that and let the developers write their own routes? So yeah, we did. This is, you can, within your Bridgetown project, you can write dynamic routes. This is just a demo of a post endpoint, which sends an email. So this lives within your Bridgetown project with everything else. So you don't need to go reaching anywhere else for simple dynamic functionality like this. But this does come with a trade-off in hosting. Because I banged on at the start about just how simple hosting is with a static site generator. This complicates matters because now you need a static site and a web service, which isn't great, but I guess for having everything live in the same repository and same project, I think it's a worthy trade-off. So your static pages are still served by your static site. When a request comes in for a dynamic endpoint, that's when things can get a bit interesting. So if you're using my favorite hosting provider, which is render.com, it's quite easy to deploy 2 services like this and then do a URL rewrite from one service to the other so that you're just punching a hole through your static site to the dynamic service. But that obviously comes with a little bit of platform lock-in. So another approach is to just run your web service on a subdomain. This could be easier. I have some experiments lined up in a few weeks to try using the Caddy web server to kind of make this a bit easy. This is a bit fiddly, but yeah, watch this space. I'm hoping to make this stuff a lot easier. But yeah, that's a trade-off that comes with having dynamic functionality. So to sum up, simple stuff in Bridgetown will always be simple. If you don't want to do anything advanced, you don't even need to know it's there. But when you need the advanced functionality, that's all there for you to use. You can go reaching for it. You can read our documentation, dive into the source code, whatever. It's all there for you, but we'll never shove it down your throat. Progressive enhancement is at the core of everything we do. We'll never force a front-end framework or anything on you. You're welcome to write your websites however you want. Bridgetown just serves as a tool to build your website for you and output some HTML. How you build it is still completely up to you. We have a very inclusive community. That's very helpful. If you get stuck, you can just pop into our Discord server. You will get help very quickly, I can promise that. I think Ruby deserves a modern static site generator, which is actively developed. Other languages have them. I think Ruby shouldn't be an exception. We have a pretty rich ecosystem of first and third-party plugins and themes. But honestly, we need more community support. We need a bit more adoption. So do find us on GitHub. Come and say hi, because contributing to open source can be incredibly rewarding and can really, really help your career. And to make that point, to conclude, I just want to share how I ended up getting involved with Bridgetown and how it's helped me. So in mid-2020, when I was still learning Ruby, I stumbled upon a completely unrelated blog post written by Jared, which just kind of mentioned Bridgetown in passing. And I kind of made a mental note of it. I looked at the website, looked like this, had to go into a web archive to dig this out. It looked like this. I just made a mental note of it, and I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm pretty skeptical of new technology in general, so I was like, yeah, OK, whatever. I'm happy with Jekyll. Fast forward a few weeks, I was trying to set up Webpack in Jekyll. And I quickly realized that hitting my head against the nearest wall is a more productive endeavor than trying to set up Webpack in Jekyll. And I remembered Bridgetown because the tagline at the time was a Webpack aware Ruby part static site generator. And I was like, maybe I should go give that thing a go. Maybe that'll solve my problem for me. And it did. I gave that a go. I was up and running in absolutely no time. And I absolutely loved it. It was still a very new project at the time. I didn't know any of this. I was just using it. And I thought, well, I'm just going to start customizing it to my liking. And I made a very small contribution to start with. So when you create a new Bridgetown site, it creates a package.json. And it just had a hard-coded site name of like Bridgetown new site or something. So I just made a change where whatever you pass into the Bridgetown new command line command gets propagated through and rendered into your package.json. It's a very, very small change. Like I think out of the plus 11 in the diff, I think half of that is probably adding my name to the contributors list. So it's a tiny change, but it got my foot in the door. And like it's really true that you don't need to start contributing to open source with something big. Small stuff like this will get your foot in the door. And I just, on the back of this, I just started like customizing it a bit more. It didn't have post-CSS support at the time. That was my first kind of big feature, which I built primarily for myself. I wanted it. It wasn't even on the project's radar. And I built it for myself, and I shared it on the community saying, I've done this. You want me to upstream it? And they're like, yeah, upstream it. So yeah, kept contributing, kept getting involved in issues and discussions and stuff like that. And about, I think, a month after this first contribution, I get this message from Jared on Discord saying, Connor Rogers and I would like to invite you to the Bridgetown core team. And my first reaction was, what the actual fuck? Honestly, I didn't know how to respond to that. But Yeah, obviously I said yes because it was a great opportunity, and Jared and I have become really good friends. We co-host a podcast together and stuff, and yeah, I've been involved in Bridgetown fairly consistently, like not much, but consistent contributions. Obviously, I'm never getting anywhere near Jared's commit count. No one is, but my contributions tend to be quite selfish. It's usually stuff that I want for myself that I then upstream into the project, which I think is actually, it's a really good way to kind of approach open source because it stops you from getting burnt out. You're not working on someone else's terms, you're working on your own terms. It's still very rewarding. So like my latest contribution was a big medium-sized feature for version 2 where we would like had a hard dependency on Puma, and I kind of went down this rabbit hole of understanding what rack was. Like, wait, why are we depending on Puma directly? Like, there is no reason we should have a hard dependency on a web server. So I ripped that out and replaced it with rack. So we still have a few kinks there, but Bridgetown should be fully rack compliant soon. So you're not kind of forced to use Puma as a web server. That was just something I wanted for myself. It was an interesting rabbit hole I went down, and it resulted in a contribution to Bridgetown. That remains my strategy, to be honest. Keeps me interested. But I think the biggest impact Bridgetown had was in early 21 when I was getting started with Ruby freelancing. And I come from a mobile background. I had absolutely no contacts in the Ruby community. I wanted to be a freelancer. I didn't want to work a full-time job. And I was like, I have no idea how to get started. But at the time, I'd already been involved with Bridgetown for a couple of months. So I reached out to some people that I had met virtually in the community through Bridgetown, like Jared and another chap named Mike Rogers, sadly, who's no longer with us, saying like, I'm looking for work, can you help? And a few days later, I got a message back from Mike saying, oh, my friend Chris is looking for some Ruby contractors. He said you were interested. Do you want to get in touch with him? So I did. Chris became my first client. I worked with him for a couple of years. And that gave me my start with Ruby freelancing. It kept me off things like Upwork and Fiverr. Like, I honestly don't know how else I would have found work without open source, without going to those marketplaces, which just tends to be a bit of a race to the bottom. So Bridgetown set me on the trajectory, which has got me to the point now where I have a fairly stable freelance business. It led me to the point where I ended up writing that book on Rails. I think if I was to look back and say that the one inflection point where my career as a Ruby developer really kind of got some traction was just thanks to Bridgetown. It's complete luck, really, that I stumbled upon this project and got involved with it. So it's been really rewarding for me to be part of this project. And so to just wrap up, Bridgetown is a great way to build modern websites using techniques like Ruby components, and it gives you a great technique to use like static sites along with a little bit of dynamic functionality. We have an extensible new content rendering engine that lets you do something advanced with relative ease. If you don't care about advanced stuff, forget everything I said about the content rendering engine. It's not going to get in your way. You can write dynamic routes using Rhoda, which is incredibly powerful. Bridgetown gave me my start as a Ruby freelancer, and I'm just incredibly grateful that I stumbled upon this project. And you can find the project on GitHub at Bridgetown RB. And that's all. Thank you very much.